I first noticed Ethan by the rhythm he did not keep. Mornings in our street had their small orchestra. The mail truck coughed at 8. The sparrows quarreled along the hedge at 9. My shop door chimed on the hour as if reminding the block to breathe. Ethan drifted through those measures like a leaf floating past a metronome, present but uncounted. He wore yesterday's t-shirt and the faraway gaze of someone saving the real beginning of life for later. His steps were soft, not from gentleness, but from a habit of avoiding edges. From my workbench I repaired time one tooth at a time. I set pallets, polished pivots, and coaxed tired balance wheels back into their small courage. Across the window, Ethan scrolled his phone on the porch, as if the feed would eventually produce a door. Sun slid over him, then shade, then sun again. Hours passed the way fog moves across a field, slow and certain. The day ended, and nothing inside him had been spent. Laziness is not an insult in my mind. It is a winter that arrives without snow, a long season where nothing grows because the seeds are unsure the ground will ever warm. When Ethan's mother waved to me, her smile had the loosened edge of someone who has run out of gentle reminders. She did not complain. She simply carried 2 grocery bags while he stayed seated, and I felt the quiet ache of that distance. One afternoon, the wind pushed the bell on my door with more insistence, and Ethan wandered in. He said hello the way a person taps a surface to see if it will hold. He ran a finger near the glass domes, and the brass faces watched him back. His eyes settled on the oldest clock I owned, a case with scratches like tired handwriting. He asked if it worked. I told him most things want to work. They only need a reason to begin. He looked around as if searching for a reason on a shelf. I saw then the weight he carried, not heavy like grief, heavy like blankets piled on a cold morning. He had covered himself for so long that he could barely stand up under his own comfort. The shop ticked around him, and something in that ticking met his silence. It drew a thin line through his afternoon. When he left, he paused at the door as though listening to decide if the world outside had changed. It had not. Only a seed had shifted in the soil. The next morning, Ethan returned. His steps were slow, but there was purpose stitched into them, faint as the first light before sunrise. He lingered by the same old clock. I told him it hadn't ticked in years. A spring had broken, the gears had stiffened, and time had abandoned it. Then I said something that made him blink. If he could make it run again, it would be his. He laughed, not with joy, but with disbelief, as if I'd handed him a mountain and a teaspoon. I showed him the small screwdrivers, the delicate tweezers, and the magnifying loop. His hands fumbled at first, clumsy in a world where precision mattered more than speed. The clock resisted him, as though testing whether he deserved its time. He worked for an hour before sighing and setting the tools down. I didn't stop him. Sometimes the first lesson is realizing that quitting is easy. Days passed and he didn't return. I went back to mending watches for customers whose lives still ran on schedule. Then one evening a sudden knock startled me. Ethan stood in the doorway, his usual lazy slouch replaced by a restless unease. He said Mr. Parker, the old watchmaker next door, had been taken to the hospital. That was my name, of course, but he'd never used it before. And in his voice was something new. Urgency. I told him the doctor said it was nothing too grave, but seeing me in that bed had stirred something in him. He admitted he'd been thinking about the clock, the one still lying silent on my workbench. He didn't know why, but he wanted to try again. I only nodded. That night he worked longer than he'd ever spent on anything that wasn't a screen. His fingers found a rhythm. His breath slowed. He began to see that each piece had its own role, that neglecting one gear could stop the whole from moving. It was patience in disguise, a lesson about life he didn't yet realize he was learning. By midnight, the clock still wasn't running, but his eyes held a quiet fire. Laziness had no place in a race where time could run out on someone you cared about. Ethan arrived early the next morning, before the sunlight had fully claimed the street. His hair was still messy, his clothes mismatched, but there was a focus in his eyes that looked almost foreign on him. He sat down at the workbench without a word, picked up the tiny gears, and began. The clock seemed to sense the change in him. His hands moved with care, not impatience, and when a piece resisted, he no longer tossed it aside. He studied it, adjusted, tried again. Hours passed, and the world outside went on with its errands and chatter. But in the shop, only the sound of tools and the soft hum of Ethan's concentration filled the air. At last, he tightened the final screw, wound the key, and waited. There was a pause, as if the clock were holding its breath with him. Then, a small, steady tick began to pulse in the silence. Ethan smiled, not wide or loud, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had found something worth the effort. He carried the clock to the hospital that afternoon. I was sitting by the window when he entered, holding it like something fragile, yet alive. He placed it on the table beside me, and the ticking seemed to fill the sterile room with warmth. I told him the clock would keep time now, as long as it was cared for. He looked at me then, as though he understood I wasn't talking only about brass and gears. On his way out, he paused at the door just as he had that first day in the shop. But this time, it wasn't to listen for a change. It was because he had become it. He walked into the afternoon light with a different stride, not faster, not louder, but with the knowledge that every step counted. Weeks later, I saw him again, this time in a press-it shirt, heading to his first job interview. The porch where he once wasted hours now sat empty in the mornings. His days no longer blurred together. He had learned the truth that had taken me a lifetime to understand. Time is not a thing you hold. It's a gift you spend, and once spent, it cannot be returned. Time slips through our fingers, whether we notice or not. Some spend years waiting for the right moment, not realizing that every moment is the right one. Ethan's journey is a reminder that change doesn't come when time allows it. It comes when we decide to use the time we have. Every day is a small clock we must wind ourselves. If you've been waiting for the perfect day to start, let this be the hour you choose. If this story moved you, share it. Let others hear its ticking, and subscribe for more tales that may change the way you see your time.